Well, we have a verdict. They've reached a verdict in this murder trial. Minneapolis police officer Eric Chauvin, who's been on trial for the murder of George Floyd. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours yesterday, and they resumed deliberating this morning at 8 a.m. Central. They're saying they've reached a verdict. I'm trying to find, we're just waiting. This is verdict watch. And I know every one of y'all are on pins and needles like I am. So let's see what happens. I'm trying to see if I can get a feed here. Yes, I can. So thankfully, CNN is not going to charge people today to look at their live streaming CNN newsroom content.
This case is a seminal case, that it is a historic case. No matter what happens with this jury, that it will be historic. But he also said something else about the fact that this case even came into
Me too, Caroline.
Even charged in the first place. He said this is what should be happening and should have been happening in cases like theirs. With other situations between police, and particularly police and African Americans in this country, he said, in his mind, when the police do something incorrect, when the police take a life, when it is not something.
I just wanted to say something here while we're waiting. Sometimes getting a verdict back this quick is a good sign. But you just never know until they announce their verdict. I feel like almost this is just as much anticipation or tense or nervousness as people were waiting, for verdicts on the O.J. Simpson case, the Rodney King case in Los Angeles.
He is an incredible person, as that whole family is. Forced into a position that no family should be in. And we're going to bring in Laura Coates and Ellie Honig into this conversation. But Sarah, stay with us as well. Laura Coates, first to you.
Okay, and also Ellie, Laura, thank you all. I know you've been standing by and waiting for this, Laura. The idea that it's now happening. It is about to happen. We are going to hear from the jury. It's been 11 hours. What do you make of it?
Well, this to me is way too short.
I'm going to be quiet for just a second, y'all.
But the idea of grappling with a holdout, the idea of somebody trying to understand and go through the nuances of it and have to be convinced, it's a very short amount of time for the full consideration of all the elements and there to be a holdout on one of the charges. What I mean by that, of course, that I think there may have been consensus on all three charges. We've not seen a single jury note here, not indicating in any way, shape, or form, Allison and Victor, if there was any confusion about the language in these charges, confusion about what it meant to have a depraved heart, confusion about what it meant to be culpably negligent, confused about what it might in fact mean to have an unintentional murder charge where you still have to prove the intent to commit the act, if not the intent to kill. This was a very complicated sort of nuanced set of laws here, and the jury within 11 hours was able to reconcile each of it, process the information, and they must come back unanimous on every single charge for them to have this quick resolution.
Ellie?
First things first, juries are inherently unpredictable. Anyone who tries to predict what a jury is going to do ahead of time is setting himself or herself up for failure. That said, the conventional wisdom is that a quick verdict like this, a clean verdict, we didn't get a single note, is generally seen as a good thing for the prosecution. That's a rule of thumb. Rules of thumbs are made to be broken, but that's conventional thinking within prosecutor's office. And most of the time, in my experience, that's the way things go. The one thing we know for certain, which is very important, is this: there is not a hung jury. One of the fears any prosecutor ever has is that one juror can hang a jury. 11 to 1 can hang a jury. You never know. We now know if this is indeed a verdict on all three counts, and that's what it sounds like from the official word from the Minnesota courts. If this is a verdict on all three counts, it is not a hung jury. If I'm the prosecutor, that is a big sigh of relief.
Guys, as you can see, we are joined by Commissioner Charles Ramsey. Commissioner Ramsey, you've been with us every day of this whole trial, every hour of every day. And so what are your thoughts as we await word now from the jury on their verdict?
Well, listen, if it is a conviction, you'll hear a collective sigh of relief from police chiefs and sheriffs across the country. I have spoken to a lot of them, and believe me, everyone is kind of holding their breath on this one, because you know what would happen should there be an acquittal, or even if there's, one out of the three counts, a conviction. But the police have to be vigilant all night, because regardless of what the outcome is, they're going to have to be vigilant, because you've seen even celebrations turn bad. And so they're going to have to be out there and be alert. But there's going to be a sigh of relief if this is a conviction, no question about it.
So again, we are expecting that verdict will be read between 4:30 and 5:30 Eastern. So that window opens at about 45 minutes from now. Laura, what's happening over the next 45 minutes as we prepare to hear the jury's decision?
Well, remember, the jurors were not deliberating on site or on location. We were told they were staying at a hotel, they were being sequestered. So there is a transportation factor. We also knew that if there was going to be a note handed over to the judge, they could actually do this by Zoom, where the defendant, Eric Chauvin, his counsel, and the prosecution team would not have to all compile and come to the courthouse, which is normally what's done in any trial. You actually have to be there to hear the jury note be read by the judge and then be able to reconcile it. Here, you're gathering the different parties together. You're ensuring that people have access to the courtroom who should be there. You're also providing for security, as you've seen all across this nation. And this is, again, not because they know the outcome of the verdict, but because they are anticipating a wide spectrum of responses depending upon the verdict, considering what the security measures will have to be for the judge, the attorneys, the defendant. If he is acquitted, he will be able to be free, which means he would be able to leave the courthouse. If he is convicted, he could be what's called step back, which means he's taken into custody yet again. He's been on release the duration of this summer and the fall and the winter. And of course, the security of the jurors, who up until now, of course, their identity has not been known by people. And that's a good thing for the sanctity of juries in America. So right now, all the different logistics are happening right now.
And Ellie, I know that it is a fool's errand to try to predict the timing of a jury, but I think that you were thinking it wouldn't be this fast.
Yeah, correct, Allison. I said in our prior segment earlier this show, I said, I have faith in the jury. I said, I believe they will get to a verdict. I don't think they're going to hang. There's a lot of processes in place that push a jury towards reaching a consensus. We were just talking about, it's hard to get 12 human beings to agree on anything. And viewers might rightly wonder, in a case that was this hard fought, that's this controversial, how can they ever get to a consensus? Well, the judge gave the instructions to the jury yesterday. They're the standard instructions. You are to work together. You are to keep an open mind. You are to consider alternate viewpoints, and it is your job, if humanly possible, to reach a verdict. This is quick. This is quicker than I expected. And like I said, the general thinking, you cannot predict the jury, but the general thinking is that's a good thing for the prosecution. And again, if you're the prosecutor, you know this jury has not hung. That is a huge piece of good news if you're the prosecutor here.
Yeah, Chief, we spoke with Sarah before we learned that there was a verdict that had come in, and she told us about some of the preps there in Minneapolis. We showed some of the boarded up businesses in Chicago, in D.C. If you're chief again back in D.C., the Metropolitan Police Department, or commissioner in Philadelphia, what are you doing for the next 45 minutes to an hour?
Mobilizing all my civil disturbance platoons, making sure that they're deployed properly in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, because of past incidents, you kind of know the points or the places where you really need to pay attention. And so right now, they're making sure everybody is there. They're already on 12-hour shifts. Days off have been canceled. So now you're just mobilizing and making sure people are in the right place whenever this verdict is read. And you can deal with whatever comes up.
And Commissioner, just to follow up on what you told us a few minutes ago, when you said that there's a collective sigh of relief from police chiefs around the country, you've spoken to many of them. You don't, I assume that you mean because there will be less, because if there's a conviction, and because that means to you that there would be less rioting.
Well, I mean, listen, that's a part of it, but it's just the right thing. I mean, what Eric Chauvin did was so far out of training, out of policy. I mean, he brought discredit upon an entire profession, everybody in this profession. who are impacted by this. And that's why, if there is a conviction, people will be relieved. They're not just chiefs. I'm talking about the men and women that are out there every day trying to do the job properly, engage in constitutional policing. Now, I realize we've got some people that don't do that, but this sends a strong message that that kind of activity, that kind of behavior just will not be tolerated. And thank God it won't be, because we need to make sure that we can put in place the kind of changes that need to be put in place for policing in order to survive in the 21st century. Status quo cannot continue.
Control room, can I go back to Sarah Seidner? Is she standing by? Sarah, let me come back to you. Philonise Floyd has been in that courtroom. You would know this, I don't. Many days, if not every day. I expect he will be back there for the reading of the verdict. Is that correct?
I do not know the answer to that, because he didn't know that the verdict had come forward. I do think that at least one member of the family, from the Floyd family and from Chauvin's family, or someone who there are 2 seats there. So they've got one set aside for anyone that Chauvin would want in the room, and one seat set aside for anyone from the Floyd family who wants to be in the room. You know,
Stand by, guys. Give me just a sec here. I've got another stream. I'm going to put this on. So, yeah, we've still got about 40 minutes before they're going to actually render to us what this verdict is.
What should have been said is that
people are taking their little commercial breaks and stuff. Pretty much anywhere right now, it looks like they're offering streams and feeds and stuff.
I think the prosecutor got it right in the charges that they brought forward. Were there other ways to try this case, other charges that might have been more appropriate?
Well, I think you can fairly say that, I mean, reasonable minds can differ as to what Derek Chauvin should have been charged with. But I think it's reasonable to say that at least one of the charges, which I believe was the 3rd-degree murder charge, was a stretch because a court said it was a stretch. A court dismissed it, and then it was reinstated. So that was, I mean, I don't like to use the word stretch because it's not a legal term, but that kind of hung in the balance for a while before it was finally reinstated. So, I mean, probably the easier case to bring would have just been the manslaughter, but the prosecution here was ambitious, and they brought a case that was initially tossed by a court and then reinstated. So those are the cases they have, but all said, they put in a very strong case at the end of the day.
Danny, thank you. I'll ask you to stand by. I want to go back to Gabe Gutierrez, who's outside the courthouse in Minneapolis. And Gabe, we have seen that image behind you of the military vehicles and the extra barricades there. We all, of course, hope that there will be a peaceful reaction, whatever it will be. Can you tell us, are there voices in the community who are actively trying to encourage calm?
Oh, certainly, Lester. And the Floyd family has said, repeatedly that they want calm, that they want peaceful protests. But at the same time, this is a community that has been hurting. I mean, we were here since, shortly after George Floyd's death last May. And many of the people that we have spoken with, even the last several days, that were telling me, Lester, that they had a very difficult time watching this trial. That this was a trial that brought back a lot of painful memories and brought to the surface something that they had been dealing with, not just for months, not just for years, but really for decades, not just in this community, but also in Brooklyn Center nearby, and in Chicago, which you mentioned earlier, has also been seeing protests, and so many communities across the country that have really struggled with how to deal with police encounters. And this is seen, you mentioned that the prosecution really tried to make this, and especially in its closing arguments, tried to stress the point that this was a trial about not who Derek Chauvin was, a police officer, but what he did. Yet, as you said, Lester, many folks in this community, and I know the Floyd family as well as Reverend Al Sharpton, as this trial was getting underway, said that this was a trial of the American policing system. And so many of the demonstrators that we have seen, they don't know what the verdict will be. Some are fearful of what it may be. They have told me that they have been traumatized by having to relive parts of George Floyd's death that was so difficult to watch on that video, with Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. But yes, and some others have said that this militarization, in their words, of the preparations for this trial, some 3,000 National Guard troops activated here. Parts of downtown Minneapolis have been boarded up with razor wire across police precincts for weeks. It's been very difficult to live under this cloud, under this this trial hanging over this whole community for the past several weeks. The mayor telling me as this trial was getting underway, as jury selection was getting underway, that this was one of the most significant moments in Minneapolis's history. So Lester, I don't think the significance of this trial, not just for this community, but really for the entire country, can be overstated. Right now, as we're seeing, you may see some folks walking behind me. There's they're starting to gather outside of this courthouse. Behind me, you've been seeing this picture of this military vehicle behind me. On the other side, there have been, demonstrators that gather there. They've been gathering on both sides of the courthouse. Yesterday, some of the protesters put up air fresheners on some of the side of this wall, signifying the encounter with Dante Wright. And there were these peaceful protests. These marchers went across the streets of Minneapolis yesterday, as they have done, really for the better part of a year now. But yes, the word has quickly spread, Lester, that this verdict has been reached. They are now anxiously awaiting for that verdict to be read within the hour. But I can tell you, Lester, having come here multiple times over the past, a little less than a year now, this is a community that has been anxiously awaiting this moment for quite a while.
Has the Floyd family been in the courtroom each day in session, and would we expect they'll be in the courtroom for the reading of the verdict?
Yes, Lester. The Floyd family, let me describe for you. I was able to be inside the courtroom during one day because of the COVID situation. Again, only 2 reporters are allowed at any one time, but there is a seat reserved for a member of the Floyd family or a supporter of the Floyd family, as well as one seat for the family or supporters of Eric Chauvin. And there has been a Floyd family member there each and every day. Oftentimes it has been Philonis Floyd, which is Floyd's brother. He actually testified during the trial. He was a spark of life witness and delivered a very emotional account of George Floyd and his relationship with his brother and also their mother. He broke down in tears on the witness stand. There have also been, cousins and other family members that have been there throughout the court. I don't know who will be there exactly today for the verdict being read, but I can tell you that Philonis Floyd this has been a gut-wrenching trial for him and for the rest of the family, having to rewatch these very painful videos over and over and over again, really, Lester, because it was part of the prosecution's case, been called the star witness of the prosecution's case, but also the defense brought up body camera videos of George Floyd's struggle with police quite often during its closing arguments. So you can only imagine, as a family member, of seeing a loved one go through this over and over again. But at the beginning of this trial, I asked the Floyd family what they thought about that. Did they think, was it painful for them? Did they want those images replayed on television over and over again? And they said, as difficult as it was for them, it was important for the public to see what happened to their loved one. And they view this trial as a way to bring about change, not just here in Minneapolis, not just around the country, but really for the American policing system as a whole. Philonis Floyd has actually testified before Congress about police reform. So this experience for them has been something larger than just the loss of their loved one, George Floyd.
Every moment of this has been gut-wrenching and emotional. Gabe, we'll, of course, be talking to you as we get closer to the verdict. That concludes our coverage now. The verdict in the trial of former officer Eric Chauvin has been reached. It will be read at 4:30 Eastern. I'll return here. We'll have live coverage when that happens. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News New York. We'll see you in just a short while.
She planned for the end of the world. Death followed in her wake, and her children went missing. Mommy Doomsday, the Dateline podcast.
It has to be heard to be believed.
Listen to all episodes now.
Get more of everything you love about today, now all day.
Woo!
Talk with friends all day.
Oh, man.
Feel good stories.
Kiss the bride.
All day. Chef secrets all day.
Salute.
Now, there's more today to love.
Welcome to Today All Day.
Get more extended interviews.
That's impressive, Chef.
More solutions.
Does it have to say antibacterial?
More must-see moments all day. So join us today, all day. Stream for free on Today.com and Peacock.
Need your true crime fix on the go? Dateline episodes are available as podcasts. Mysteries with a twist from the True Crime Original. Wow. Listen to Dateline wherever you get your podcasts.
Right now on NBC News Now.
Here in Chicago, about 20,000 middle schoolers returning to school today.
They also took advantage of existing vaccine distribution networks throughout Alaska.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
Are we vaccinating right now to keep ahead of these mutant strains?
We still have a demand that far exceeds supply.
He's the first African-American crew member on an extended mission on the International Space Station.
To be able to see someone that looks like them, that is super important.
Perhaps the most successful gospel artist today.
Where you're going is a lot bigger than where you've been.
I am looking forward to seeing you in Tokyo.
Thank you today, show family. Love you guys.
You're back.
back early, and I'm looking to see these.
I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't realize that the.
Glenn, your reaction to the verdict being reached this quickly as well, and what will you be watching for in the courtroom in just a matter of moments?
You know, I agree with Cynthia. A quick verdict, the prevailing wisdom is a good verdict for the prosecution. Why is that? Because there is so much that we go through, prosecutors go through in the run-up to a trial. A judge had to approve an arrest warrant and make an assessment of the evidence. A grand jury had to vote to indict, which is an assessment of the evidence. The investigators, detectives, and agents and prosecutors had to make an assessment of the strength of the evidence, and all of those factions basically agreed this case should be tried. So a quick verdict generally means everyone in the system got it right, and the jury convicts and holds the offender accountable. That's not a guarantee, but with a verdict this quick on all three counts, this is not a split verdict because they announced they have unanimous verdicts on all counts. I would be shocked to see anything but 3 guilty verdicts on the 3 charges.
Thanks, Lexi. I appreciate you.
Glenn, remind our viewers, if you will, as well. We're talking about 3 charges here, as you mentioned: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. Could you just sort of talk through our viewers what the differences are here and what they should be watching for as they read the decision on each of those
well, the interesting
particular charges?
Sure. The interesting part is none of these crimes require an intentional killing. The most serious of the 3, second-degree murder, can be proved by an unintentional killing committed during the course of a felony. And that's why I thought prosecutor Steve Schleicher's argument was so strong when he said, because of the excessive force, what Derek Chauvin did was a felony assault. And that is what makes it second-degree murder. And I hate to get ahead of ourselves and talk about sentencing, but you know, the maximum sentence for that second-degree murder charge is 40 years in prison. However, there are guidelines that try to norm across the spectrum of convictions, you know, taking into account an offender's background, the circumstances of the crime, prior record of the defendant. But I would say, you know, the sentencing guidelines are only going to govern so much because this case is an outlier. This is a police officer who swore to protect and defend the citizens of Minneapolis, only to execute one of them in broad daylight on videotape. So this is a case where I could see something called an upward departure from the guidelines, even if the guidelines for the ordinary second-degree murder case, the more ordinary second-degree murder case, might set a particular sentence. I could see the prosecutors say, all bets are off in this case, and judge, you need to hit the long ball sentence because of who Derek Chauvin was and how he violated his oath to protect and serve.
All right, Glenn and Cynthia, thank you both so much for being here. We're going to head back out to Minnesota. I know we will be checking in with you both throughout the evening. Thank you so very much for being with us. All right, let's head over to MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi. He is in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, where he's been keeping an eye not only on the Derek Chauvin trial, but also tracking protests there as well in the shooting of Daunte Wright. Ali, tell us where you are. Tell us what's going on there. What is the air like, the environment like, if you will?
Yeah. Sorry, Allison, you had bad information there. We are actually right here in downtown Minneapolis. I'm right next to the court. This is where the jury
all right.
is assembling.
Yeah, I should have known by the fencing, Ali.
So, no, I know. I'm sorry. We'll deal with that later. But we got 2 layers of fencing all around this, National Guard and police. Here's the interesting thing. This is actually a transit plaza right here. You'll see one of those trams coming in right now. This is usually fairly busy. It's toward the end of the day. When word of this verdict came out, downtown emptied out. There was almost like a traffic jam. All the garages in the buildings, everybody started to leave. You can see here what could be coming close to the end of the day. There's virtually nobody on these trams. There's nobody waiting to get on these trams. They're emptying things out right now. There is no gathering of people here in downtown Minneapolis. This is faster than I think a lot of people expected. There have been crowds gathered over the last few days. Last night, we had a group of a few hundred. Here's how it's looking in terms of safety and security. There's no direct interaction at the moment between police or National Guard on one side and the public on the other. In fact, the streets are largely empty of police. There are National Guards officers on various street corners. They're riding with police and with EMT, by the way, for those responses. All police and EMT time off has been canceled. Everybody's at work. There is school in session right now. It's ending now. We're toward the end of the day. There's no school scheduled to be in session for the next 3 days. So this is a little earlier than everybody here had actually planned for. But tension levels are high, and we are all waiting to see what happens in this verdict, Allison.
So, Allie, you have been spending the last few days in Minnesota. You've been there in Minneapolis. You've been in Brooklyn Center. Could you sort of compare for us, if you will, what it's been like and how it's been different in those two places? Because when we checked in with you in Brooklyn Center this week, you did see some folks milling about. It did seem less of a fortress. Minneapolis just seems, you're only 10 miles from there, but it seems like they really have the city on lockdown right now.
So the similarities is businesses are all boarded up. You can see this is actually a government building here, but you can see all the boarding up here. This is what everything looks like in downtown Minneapolis. In Brooklyn Center, all the businesses around the police station are boarded up. The police station, very much like this government center, has 2 rows of fencing, and it's all fenced off. National Guard are still there. But the difference is with Minneapolis, with Brooklyn Center, it's like after George Floyd died. The center of attention was the police station at which the officers were based. This is now downtown Minneapolis. This isn't where this isn't the scene of the crime, if you will. So it does not have the same center of gravity, which is why officials here are actually a little bit concerned, because if people are going to demonstrate in a place like Minneapolis, it's not clear where exactly you demonstrate. If you remember a year ago, it started at one police station and that was overcome. Then it moved miles away to another police station. Then it moved miles away in terms of a rally. So it's not clear what the center of gravity is going to be. Most people, including the Floyd family lawyers, are going to be downtown. The Attorney General, Keith Ellison, is going to be making a statement after this. The Hennepin County Court Complex and City Council is all in this area that I'm in. Downtown. So it's not clear how this is all going to go down and what's going to happen. But I will say this, the protesters we've seen have been orderly. They've been marshaled. There have been people who have kept them off the sidewalks, away from property. They've kept them in the street. They've made sure they're not far enough ahead of the crowd, far enough behind. And these are not police. There are no police involved in any of the protests. So there's an orderliness to the protests. There appears to be an orderliness with respect to law enforcement and the National Guard here. I think nobody wants a repeat of last year's out of control seeming clashes between groups.
Sure. Allie, I got to ask you, I know there aren't a lot of folks around right now, but if I know you never go to a place and just keep to yourself and not talk to people. What have you been hearing from the people you've spoken with today? What's the vibe you're getting from folks there in Minneapolis? Are they nervous? Are they scared? Are they anxious? What have they been saying to you today?
You know, I had somebody say to me, you don't have this much planning and shutting down if you don't think you've done something wrong. So there are definitely people who were reacting to how shut down Minneapolis is. But most of what I've been hearing has been a larger reflection on this case. And if I summed it up into a sentence, Allison, it would be, if not this, then what? The frustration on the part of people here is that there's more evidence in this case than they've ever seen before. The other thing to remember is there has been a police officer in recent years convicted of shooting a civilian. Mohammed Noor, several years ago, it was actually 11 hours of testimony, and he was found guilty. So, and he's black, and the defendant was white. The victim was white. So that's got a lot of people thinking about the fact that juries in this place do have the ability to convict police. Do they have the ability to convict white police in the killing of black people?
Allie, sorry, I just have so many questions because you're there and obviously we are not, but we're aware of what's going on, right? Because we're in the news. Everybody knows this verdict is coming in a matter of minutes. Do folks there know that that's about to happen?
Yes. Well, that's what triggered the exodus from downtown. I mean, literally, we're all within a 2-block area of each other initially. So we hear about it. Everybody downtown. You'd go by buildings, and it's COVID and it's sort of shut down. So I didn't think there were that many people here in the first place in downtown Minneapolis. And then you suddenly see traffic. The traffic light closest to the courthouse has now been put on flashing red, so it doesn't move from green to red. It's like a stop sign. So there's a big heavy flow of traffic out of the city. I think people thought there might be a verdict tomorrow or Thursday.
Look at that smug bastard. Look at that smug fucker. Excuse my French. Well, guys, I just wanted to take an opportunity here while we are in midstream of this verdict coming down within the next 20 to 30 minutes, maybe. You know, that it is, I'm nervous too. I'm nervous too. I just wanted to say thanks for y'all coming in and doing this verdict watch with all of us. This is, you just never know what a jury's going to come back with, right? You never know. You never, ever know. But they do say traditionally fast returned verdicts like this is a good thing for prosecution, but I don't even want to try that. Like now's a time to be more humble than any other time in life. And I'm extremely nervous watching this too. So I hope you guys are sitting down for the next 30 minutes at least. If you are working today, you might want to make yourself not available. I think this feels like, Patricia, it almost feels like how people felt when, you know, we were awaiting the O.J. Simpson verdict, how anxious that feeling was, and even the Rodney King, that verdict regarding Rodney King in Los Angeles. That's the case that keeps coming to my mind right now. So he did have a smug look on his face, right? It's so crazy. And I don't even understand, like the very fact that he's even taking it to trial and not only putting George Floyd's family through this and the public through this, he has an extreme smug on his face. And it's disgusting. But what do you expect from somebody who could lean their knee on someone's neck for over 8 minutes and asphyxiate them to death? So I'm praying that he is convicted fully. Hey, as far as I'm concerned, that man could get his sentence consecutive instead of concurrent. But it's got everybody on edge. It really, really does. Now, I do want to show just really quick a feed from in front of the courthouse right now. So right now, in front of the actual courthouse, people are starting to gather in front of the courthouse. This is local news here.
The jury found that it did here.
And Lee, the jurors heard from Eric Nelson for an extended period of time in those closing arguments. That was his moment to really put into their heads, you know, his case and sum it all up from how did he do, strengths and weaknesses in Eric Nelson's closing arguments.
Hey, Natalie, good to see you today.
The overall strength of Eric Nelson's closing argument is that he gave options and he was very good at delivering the message from his tone of voice, from his conviction and passion. And I think that was very, very good. However, the context behind this and the substance behind it, I think, you know, there's a quote by James Baldwin that says, people live in history, but we can't not let history live in us. And the historical context of past trials with this where officers were acquitted and found excuses.
Thanks for being here, Sunshine.
To that acquittal. I think people just said enough is enough. We are living in a different time. Minnesota has to revamp their ways of life, the ways of thinking, and this may be the
you can see people gathering.
In that direction.
Yeah, looking back at the
this will
testimony
sound
and
better.
closing arguments, the state said, Lee, that this
put
is
my
about
headset
putting the
in,
police
hold on,
department
y'all.
on trial, but police work is very much under the microscope as a result of this trial. And I think back to Chief Arredondo on the stand, and he seemed very much like a chief of police that was also fighting for his department. And just your thoughts as we get ready for this verdict and where we go as a community.
Yeah, where we go as a community, let's start there first. You know, certainly
That's probably
if
going to
there
be
is
better audio.
excitement because there's a conviction.
Absolutely,
I think we have to
Natalie.
put that in
Thank you.
perspective because
How could, there is
frankly,
no other
we're all
place I'd
saddened
rather
by
be, you know?
the fact that
When
Minnesota
this
in
happened,
particular
we
is in
covered
this
this over
situation. So
here.
we have
You
to put
guys
that
were
in
here
perspective.
when
Now,
this
putting
initially happened
perspective
last
as an
year.
African
So
American,
yeah,
the fact that the system has some opportunities where it
but
is
I mean,
listening
it's
to your
they're about to
voice
read this verdict
is certainly something that we
any
can be very,
minute. So
very
they're saying
proud of.
between 3:30,
The
4 o'clock
third
Central
issue
Standard
is
Time.
how do we unify?
We're
How do we
at
put the pieces
3:25 right
back
now.
together to say that we're all equal, that we all have a purpose
Yes,
here,
November
and
Rain.
that we
Hey,
can
how are
treat
you?
each other
Hope you're
with
well.
humane. And that doesn't
It's a great
just
song,
mean
by the way, by Guns
you
N'
and I
Roses.
on the street. That
November
means our
Rain.
law enforcement. Because now, like I said, in the last 365 days, we're on our Minnesota alone is on its a case where there's been African Americans that have been killed at the hands of minor traffic stops. And so I think this is going to allow us to revisit our own kind of personal souls and our own personal paths and make a direction forward. But we have to do that unified.
All right, Lee.
Hey,
we're
hey,
going to keep
you.
checking in with you here as the afternoon
How are
goes
you,
on.
Sharon?
Thank you for your time. And we want to remind our viewers that what you're looking at on your screen are some
Thanks for
live
coming
pictures. The
through.
bottom left-hand corner is 38th in Chicago, also known as George Floyd Square. And the other
Absolutely,
two live
Patricia.
shots are the Government Center in downtown Minneapolis as we await this verdict. The top
Hey,
right-hand
Denise, I
corner, of course,
know.
live in the courtroom, and we'll take you there as soon as we can.
This, as you can imagine, for our viewers, has been an
Yeah,
enormous
very
amount
much
of
so.
coverage, an enormous amount of eyeballs covering this trial, both here in
Good to see you,
Minnesota
Sharon.
and
Thanks for
nationally
coming
and
through.
globally. One of the things, Hannah Flood, as
Good
we
to see you again,
wait
by
for
the
this
way.
jury to come back with a verdict, remind our viewers exactly what they had to consider. There were three charges, three very distinct charges. One of the charges, the third-degree murder, was one that was what we could call a late ad after the judge originally, back in October, threw it out as a possible charge. It went to the appeals court and got put back into this case as a charge against Eric Chauvin. But bring our viewers up to speed in terms of exactly what they had to consider.
Sure, Randy. So we have this second-degree murder charge. And in that charge, the state needs to prove that Chauvin caused George Floyd's death while committing a third-degree assault. So the state does not have to prove that Derek Chauvin meant to kill George Floyd or even that he meant to seriously hurt him. They only have to prove that the assault was intentional, meaning Chauvin intentionally applied unlawful force to Floyd. The former Minnesota State Supreme Court justice that I was talking to today said kind of a comparison for this is, think of that bar fight scenario. Someone gets in a fight with somebody, they intentionally punch them, say, assault them, right? But then that person might end up falling and hitting their head and dying. So the act itself was intentional, but the consequence was not intentional. That's what that second-degree murder charge means. Then you have this third-degree murder charge. This was the late ad. This is the one that was applied in the Mohammed Noor case and went through the state Supreme Court and could still, went through the state court of appeals and could still end up in Minnesota State Supreme Court. And on that third-degree murder charge, the state needs to prove that Chauvin caused Floyd's death by committing a dangerous act to others. You heard one of our legal experts, Mike Bryant, talking about the court of appeals decided that that danger to others can just be one person. So that was one of our big questions in this case. Would the state be able to prove that Derek Chauvin's actions were dangerous to multiple people? But that state appeals court ruling says that one person is enough for other. Then also in that definition where things get a little dicey is that this person was acting with a depraved mind. Now, depraved mind doesn't mean any kind of psychosis or mental illness. Depraved mind just means that an act was so unreasonable, that someone was not thinking about the dangers they were causing or thinking of the consequences. The way it was described to me today is it's an act that's reckless and careless, and the perpetrator shows a complete lack of regard for human life. So that's one of those pieces, Randy, of that third-degree murder charge that they have to consider. And then we have this this third and final charge. This is the second-degree manslaughter charge. And for that, the state needs to prove Derek Chauvin created an unreasonable risk and consciously took the chance of causing death or great harm to another person. I personally find these definitions so fascinating. It gives us an idea into the debate or the conversations that were happening in the deliberation room while the jury was trying to decide a guilty or a not guilty verdict.
Right.
It shows it's not it's not so cut and dry, Randy. It's not so simple. There are multiple elements, multiple legal definitions within each one of these charges. And that's why we kind of figured it might take them several days to work through all of this. But as you've been hearing, about 10 hours the jury took to deliberate before announcing that they had reached a verdict.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Important also to note that the jury can consider all of the charges, can convict on all, some, or none. And that is the case that we see here today. BC O'Neary has been with us from the beginning as well. She's watched this from a standpoint of in the morning hours of testimony. BC, this jury, 10 hours, considered quick, and the analysts are unanimous in their thinking that it means some type of unanimous conviction.
Yeah, we want to bring in trial attorney Mike Bryant for some more legal analysis. Mike, can you just kind of walk us through what this process is like when a verdict is read before and after? What can we expect?
Well, what'll happen is the jury will come in, everybody will stand because they're the fact finders like the judge. And then the judge will get, he'll ask if they've come to a unanimous verdict. And
So, while we're waiting here, the clock just hit 3:30. We are expecting the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial to be read any minute. Any minute. So I know you guys are just as nervous as I am. People are starting to gather on the courtyard, or the court in front of I guess you could call it the courtyard, but in front of the court building in Minneapolis. And they in just the last 5 or 10 minutes alone, we've seen quite a few people actually seem to sort of pile there in front of the courtroom. So this particular feed, you've got 4 individual feeds right now that we're just waiting on right now in the upper right hand corner. We're just waiting on that particular feed to come back and come in, and they will proceed to read this verdict. He's got 3 different charges that will be read as far as whether they find him guilty or not guilty. So he faces just on the one charge 40 years in prison. He could potentially be found, innocent of one form or version of the murder charge, manslaughter versus murder. There's these different distinctions that they make. And yeah, so yeah, it's starting to get pretty full. So, I'm just going to go back and we're going to just continue to listen in until they get ready to read this verdict, y'all.
Taking it back now downtown to Minneapolis, and I believe we have Courtney Godfrey.
Yeah, and
there.
it's important to note the courtroom is almost empty. Just have the essential staff there, and then one family member for each side. So traditionally, we would have reaction in the courtroom. With COVID, that's not. It's going to be rather quiet, and instead, you'll see a lot of reaction outside. Courtney Godfrey, downtown Minneapolis, with a look at a crowd that is growing quickly. Courtney.
Hey, Sharon.
Yeah, Kelsey, I'll tell you right
I'll
now.
pose that question to everybody who's in the chat who can
people
see.
Continue to come in, and chance just
My
started,
hope
so you can hear
is
the
we get a
protesters are
guilty
starting.
verdict
But it's jovial at this
at a
moment.
second
I think
degree
a lot of
level.
people are having that feeling
The
that
40-year
because
charge.
this verdict has come in after only about
I feel
10
like-
hours of deliberating, that this can only be good
I
news
honestly
for their
feel
cause. I'll
like-
show you that to the left here of my.
I honestly feel like Derek Chauvin he's just been so smug about this whole thing. Even when he was leaning on George Floyd's neck, he sat there stone-faced, smug. And I mean, while people were begging him, they were begging. People begged him to release his knee. People begged and begged him. I mean, it's absolutely, I don't think he tried. He didn't come to work, you know what I mean, with this whole plot of murder. That's not he's not facing a premeditated charge, first degree. So that's why we only see the second degree charges, and then it subsequently goes lower. The charge chart goes lower into the, I believe, lower level felony. I'm not sure if any of those can be classified as misdemeanors at any point. I've heard of some states having some really weird classifications on murder charges, but we're going to see.
Well as in the studio here. Paul Bloom has been there
Everybody's
from literally
nervous.
the first
I
second
know
that
all
this
of you are
began.
nervous.
And I want Paul to join us now.
He is
Paul, there's
cocky,
one thing
right?
that
I know,
think we need to do
Lexi.
as
It's
we
crazy.
approach the verdict moment, and that is give our viewers a chance to sort of relive some of those iconic moments of this trial. No one knows this better than you in terms of our team here. Give us a sort of Reader's Digest condensed version of how this thing started and up to the point yesterday when this jury took it on.
Minority this time in your thinking
quite,
process there.
I mean, it's been 6+ weeks, right, from jury selection all the way to today, a verdict having been reached. I think back to the early stage of the trial itself, the emotional
Oh my gosh, me
witness
too, yeah.
testimony, the eyeball witnesses at the scene of 38th in Chicago.
Hey,
the
Antoinette,
anger,
how
the
are you?
sadness, the regret, watching the incident unfold.
All right,
I think
y'all,
about
we're
the
just
911
gonna
dispatcher watching on her television screen.
keep
How this all
listening in
got
here.
started,
They're going to
watching that
read this
deadly
verdict
arrest at the time and being
any
so concerned.
second.
She called the sergeant that night, and then the way the prosecution spun that tale into their closing argument, that even at the heart of this case was never about taking on the police in general. This was the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. And they proved that point by saying, look, some of these eyewitnesses who were angry, who were agitated, who were frustrated, who were concerned, you know who their first call was to after they witnessed what they did? It was to the police. So Jenna Scurry, the 911 operator, Donald Williams, the MMA fighter trained in chokeholds, who's watching what he thinks is a blood choke going down on the street, begging Derek Chauvin, yelling, screaming at him to get off. He had some other choice words, but the witness testimony from the scene, I'll never forget Charles McMillan, of course, the elder on the scene there, encouraging George Floyd to comply, to get in the squad car.
I got him.
And
I
then
got
just
that troll.
breaking down
Thanks, Ming.
emotionally on the witness stand while watching
him,
the body
Lexi.
camera video, and George Floyd crying out for his mama. He, of course, McMillan in his 60s had lost his mother recently, and they needed to take that 10-minute break. The police testimony that came in, the crushing of the whole so-called blue wall of silence, or the protection of police in uniform and protecting one another wearing the badge, that disintegrated.
To anybody joining now, we are literally waiting. We're on pins and needles waiting for this verdict to be read any second.
And his actions that day, Richard Zimmerman, the longtime
they are going to be reading the verdict
the medical
against the murder charges against Derek Chauvin.
Did Martin
We're going to
really
find out what the jury
display of knowledge
has decided.
Walking this jury through what his
hey,
thoughts
what's up,
were
Queen? How are you, babe?
Hey,
Unknown,
on the
good to see you.
Restraint and the lack of oxygen George Floyd was taking in as pinned to the ground. George Floyd trying to literally breathe with his knuckles and the like. And then, of course, the defense doing its best to bring out.
What's up, Miss Kia? How are you?
Some other thoughts and processes.
You did, Miss Truth Seeker. Yeah,
it's good to have.
If you see somebody doing some crazy stuff like that, trolls love to come in and be
unbiased,
disingenuous during times like this. So feel free to snipe them on up out of here today.
To explain what was going on. Derek Chauvin's training, what an objectively reasonable officer would do in the totality of the situation. So it was a beautiful system that played out before us over the last month plus. You guys know I love being at the courthouse for these very reasons. This is people's lives that are at stake here. Derek Chauvin's future.
Unknown, good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
At stake with what we're about to hear. I do want to just turn, just because
so
I kind of have a bird's eye view.
People are gathering on in front of the courthouse. Look at that. We're now at a bird's eye view
of the Hennepin County Government Center. Courtney mentioned media mostly there, but of course demonstrators are arriving. They want to be in close proximity as this verdict is read. And I just want to follow up on one of her points about law enforcement closing down some additional streets. They had some extra fencing, right? We all know the whole building was fortified, but then they had fencing posts at different spots where they could close off blocks to kind of give more of a shield to downtown City Hall, the Hennepin County Government Center. So in Courtney's last report, it sounded like they must have closed down one of those extra barricades there.
Good to see you.
But it's a really interesting vantage from being
Natalie,
up
I
here
know,
because I
right?
do see
I know what
people
you mean.
flocking.
I'm just
to
going to
the
go on
government
mute, y'all.
center
Let's
behind
just
me to
listen
be
in
here
like
for this
this
historic
verdict is
and,
about to be read.
global impactful moment. There also is sort of a mass exodus that's happening. Of course, where I sit or stand heading in this direction would be the interstates getting on 35W. And if you head the other way towards 394, there is this sort of exodus out of downtown. And you were with me earlier when I was speaking to criminal defense attorney Ryan Pasiga, who offices downtown.
Hey
His
there,
employees
Mars
all had
Alive.
go bags
How are
from their
you?
office up on the 27th floor of a nearby tower.
It's good
for
to
this
see you. I
very
hope you're
moment.
doing
They
well.
grabbed their stuff and left. We know they cleared out government buildings, the federal
Is
courthouse
it starting to
on
snow,
the other side
Lexi?
of the Hennepin County Government Center. They
Absolutely,
cleared out
Miss
everybody.
D.
They are very concerned
There is no
about
place
what
I
comes
could
next, guys,
possibly
after
be.
this verdict is read. The preparation has been done. Is everybody ready? We will see.
You are absolutely right, Paul. Two resounding questions as of yesterday. What will this jury come back with, and what will happen after the verdict is read? Those are the things that we're anxiously awaiting for. As you can imagine, we do have Skyfox 9 up there in the top left of your screen, as you can see. And Paul noted that the crowd of people is beginning to grow outside the Hennepin County Government Center. There's 4 boxes there, 38th in Chicago in the lower left. And of course, then a ground view of outside the courthouse there in the plaza. And then the
I'm
courthouse.
going to get a little bit more quieter here, you guys.
Courthouse right there. And that is the one we'll focus on as this jury comes back with its verdict. We'll go full on that. We'll hear every second of it when it happens, and we're told it should happen before 4 o'clock.
Yeah, waiting for that in the next 20 minutes or so. Also just want to make note that this is a trial that was televised for the world to see, to understand the process, to hear the testimony day after day from jury selection until closing arguments. And so today we will see the verdict being read live as well, something that it's a glimpse into the courtroom that we don't often get here.
You're right, Kelsey. I mean, it really is hard to overstate the magnitude of this moment as we and the nation and the world wait for this verdict. We want to bring in our legal analyst, Lee Hutton. Lee, along those lines, I mean, a big question for you here. What's at stake?
Well, I'll break it down into 2 comments. The first comment is Minnesota is going to show the world their reflection of leadership. Attitude reflects leadership. So if the verdict is acquittal, we're going to be the leaders in that decision. If it reflects conviction, we'll be the leaders the same. And it's ironic that both sides, the state and the defense, talked about heart. And I looked at the definition of humanity, and the quality or state of being human joined together by their common humanity. And hopefully that the decision, no matter what it is, will do just that. And that's how big it is, because that humanity is going to spread throughout the world based on what we do here. This is, to say it's big is a certainly understatement. I would say this will reflect who we are in our souls. This decision will reflect how the rest of the world is in theirs.
And in closing arguments, the state reminding the public that the Minneapolis Police Department's motto is to protect with courage, serve with compassion. Can you walk us through, Lee, what will happen as this verdict is read, what will happen in the courtroom today, which will be relatively quiet because of the COVID restrictions, but then also when will we have sentencing and what can we expect with that?
So sentencing is going to be off for quite some months. I think the other legal expert mentioned, he's absolutely right, that there's a lot of procedures with regard to evaluations, procedures. There's going to be some motions by the state for upward departure of the sentencing guidelines. There's going to be motions by the defense for a downward departure of those guidelines. So we're not going to learn of a sentence anytime soon here. With all that being said, the mood in the courtroom is going to be controlled by the judge. He understands that this verdict means a lot to a lot of different people and means differently to a lot of different people. And so number one, he's going to make sure that the jury gets the utmost respect, and they will start out by standing for the jury, and when the verdict is read, everyone is going to have to remain calm. There's not going to be any outbursts first, and then based on that decision, you'll see Derek Chauvin either being escorted to the back outside the courtroom where he'll await his fate. If it's conviction, he will be charged and he'll go to wherever he's going to be held. If it's an acquittal, I'm pretty sure that they will let people leave the courtroom in an orderly fashion, so in anticipation of people's outburst.
Lee, there will be a lot of emotion when this verdict is read, and if he is convicted on 1, 2, or 3 of these charges, help us understand there is an appeal process that would likely take place, and help us understand between those charges what may end up happening down the road.
I think we all can anticipate, based on defendant's motions, that there's going to be an appeal if there's a conviction. We'll have to wait and see what terms or what are the arguments for appeal. We have at least some indication that possible the jury sequestration or lack thereof basically tainted the jury. One other potential appeal is that comments from local leaders disturbed how the jury was thinking. And there may be many more. I mean, we've even had an allegation of prosecutorial misconduct based on statements in the closing arguments, all of which were denied by the judge. With that being said, the defense has a right to put those arguments before the Court of Appeals that will judge. Now, again, that appeal process will take some time. Typically, you have 90 days after a certain timeline to give your notice, and then the Court of Appeals will give you the timing of the date so you can prepare your full arguments. And so all that needs to take place and happen. I don't think any appeal or notice of appeal will take place until after sentencing, but there are occasions where you can make the appeal much quicker.
Lee, your legal mind, your experience in the courtroom, we appreciate
Any
your
minute now,
analysis
guys.
so much.
Any minute, any
in talking
second.
with you over the past couple of weeks. We'll come back to you in
I
just
think
a little
every
bit. But we
news
also wanna
outlet or news
see what's
agency
happening
is
outside right now,
live
too.
streaming
Yeah, we want
this
to go
right
to 38th
now.
in Chicago.
This is
that very
local
iconic
news,
location
Fox
now here in
9.
the Twin Cities where George Floyd died on May 25th. Sort of the focal point of where this all began. Our Babs Santos is there with us today. Babs, you mentioned earlier the mood at 38th in Chicago, somewhat subdued, sort of anticipatory, waiting to see what happens.
And we know that court feed that we were looking at, there's only
Yeah,
one
Randy,
feed
the
into the
crowd
courtroom.
behind me has circled up and they're
So,
beginning to pray here
There's
at
nothing
38th in
different on
Chicago
any of the
in
other channels. Like
anticipation of this
literally
verdict
all of
being
us
read. They're doing it right here
are
on the
watching this
ground next to the
live,
spot where
waiting on
George
pins and
Floyd's body
needles,
lay
Lexi,
unconscious
right?
for
Like,
some minutes, as we all saw in that video. I'm going to step to the side. I'm trying to speak in a low voice because this,
are you
for these
serious,
people,
Queen?
is a
They
sacred place.
just extended
And
it
now
out
that this
another
verdict has
45
been announced
minutes.
and is on the way, today is a sacred day. Minute by minute,
The
we're
more
seeing
they
more and more
wait, the
people starting
more
to show up.
time people
They've been
have to
chanting, and excitement for this verdict is just growing. But at the same time, I've got to say, they are also pretty nervous. They just don't know what to expect.
I can imagine that. We're seeing a similar situation, Babs, at outside of the Hennepin County Government Center in the plaza.
like, I'm
there.
not going to do
And we're
anything
seeing
for the next
also
45
the
minutes.
Sky
then.
Fox 9 shot
Like,
there, and as we've said in the last
no
half
work,
hour or so, that is a
nothing.
much larger
I'm
and
away.
growing crowd by the minute. Babs, you said there's a prayer vigil going on right there. Do you get a sense that the crowd that is gathered there is really there just to hear the verdict in the George Floyd case against Derek Chauvin?
That's what we're hearing,
or is
Sharon.
there more being
Yeah, we're hearing that too.
anticipated there, being planned there after
And I'm
this
keeping
verdict
up
comes
with
down?
the CNN live feed for, so
they've said
they're
that
saying they
no matter
pushed
what
it out.
happens
They're
with this
reading another
verdict, this is always
45
going to be a
minutes.
special place for them. I think they wanted to come here to come back to the place where this all started.
Now our
And when they
anticipation's
first
going to
circled up,
rise
they
even
were
more.
praying. Now they've just started to speak and really get their messages across that they want to see
Is
changes in
anyone
the
down
system and
there? Does
changes in
anyone?
policing, no matter
If
what
anyone's
this jury
down
decides
there,
here.
there's a
All right,
question
Babs
being
Santos
asked
at 38th
in the chat to see
Chicago,
if, ask
one
if
of the
there's
very
any
important focal
military
points in the Twin Cities as we wait for
currently
this
down
verdict.
there
Again, we're
at the
told that
courthouse.
verdict will likely come down. The jury's decision likely come down before 4 o'clock. We
I
were
think
given
that's a
notice
smart
shortly
idea,
after
Dree.
2 o'clock that this was going to happen today. Some 10 hours into deliberation for yesterday. approximately 6 today. And if it comes down around 4 o'clock, that's a 24-hour window between the closing arguments and the jury taking this under consideration. Again, there are 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. That jury can find Derek Chauvin not guilty on all 3 charges, or they can break it down and find him guilty on any one or all of those charges. That's something to watch for when they do finally read the verdict and their decision in this case as it comes up.
And the world is watching right now. News
Oh yeah, the
headlines
world is absolutely
around
watching.
the world talking about this verdict. New Zealand, Australia, I mean, around the world and across the country. There's a crowd gathering right now where George Floyd was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And as you'll remember, last summer, there were marches around the world in Germany, Australia, all over Europe about George Floyd and this moment that happened on May 25th when he lost his life. So there are lots of eyeballs on this verdict and where we go from here as a community and as a nation. And there is a lot of anxiety in those crowds right now. A lot of people wondering what the verdict is going to be and what that will mean for this city, for the state, and for this country.
We want to go now live to our Mitty Hicks, who is also at 38th in Chicago in a little bit of a different location in front of the Cup Foods. Mitty, what's the tone like where you are?
Yeah, well, just a minute ago, people were chanting Black Lives, They Matter here. And you do feel this sense of
this is in
urgency,
front
this sense
of
anxiety
the location
here wait for that verdict.
where George Floyd was
when
killed.
We first came down
this
here,
particular reporter's actually standing there. There's people that's been gathering there.
Here, I'll just get out of the way. You know,
At
Babs
the
mentioned
courthouse,
this earlier. This is a sacred place for a lot
in
of people.
different
we have
states.
Activists coming down.
His hometown.
Really talking to the crowd about, listen,
so they're showing a lot of different feeds, and they're saying that it's going to be another 45 minutes before they release the verdict.
Over and over again.
Read the verdict.
To the right of me, you see more signs. You see signs for Dante Wright. You see pictures of Philando Castile. You just kind of see people waiting, coming together, and really just trying to be each other's support as they wait for this verdict. One of the activists in the middle, there's a little crowd that circled together by a mural of George Floyd. And one of the activists was really saying, you know, we have to do more work. No matter what happens with this verdict, we have to go to certain communities, figure out how to fund other communities. So again, that we don't see these type of trials again, because her point was that, you know, a lot of times in certain communities, they just don't have a lot of resources. So that's one of the things she was focusing on, is getting more resources in the community, even after this verdict. So again, it's very anxious here. A lot of waiting going on, a lot of chanting. They are starting up again with saying Black Lives, They Matter here. So that's what we're seeing a little bit here on the scene, Kelsey and Randy.
All right, Mitty, thank you so much. Paul Bloom standing by the Hennepin County Government Center, up in the nest there above all of this, outside that area where the verdict will come down. He joins us now once again. Paul, your standpoint, your viewpoint, a good one, because you can see, as you said before, people leaving the city, trying to get out before this verdict comes down, and what may happen after that, what may not happen after that. We want to make sure that we stay focused on that as well. But again, you're also seeing the droves of people that are moving into the city outside the government center.
Yeah, Randy, it's kind of a tale of two views from here. On one side, the growing crowd on the South Lawn, and then, as I mentioned, the traffic heading out towards the ramps, leaving downtown. And as you see on that screen, as we have the multi-box format for you, I keep looking at that seal of Minnesota in the courtroom. And obviously, I've been in the media center throughout this case. And we know that the court TV cameras, when nobody's in the courtroom or they're setting up, they zero in. The camera can only show that seal of Minnesota. And then once Judge Cahill takes his position on the bench, then they are allowed to pull out. And that is when we know we are within moments of this verdict being read. So I'm continuing to just kind of eyeball that seal, because once that camera starts pulling out of that shot, we will know that the verdict is upon us. And as I stand here and reflect a little bit on kind of just the last couple hours now, The jury reaching a verdict here within 10 hours of deliberations. I mentioned off the top when I first started looking back at the Mohammed Noor police shooting, where Mohammed Noor was convicted on 2 counts, acquitted on the third, the highest charge. He was convicted on third-degree murder and manslaughter charges. That jury deliberated between 10 and 11 hours. So right in that same window of time that we're talking about here, 10 hours of jury deliberations, a verdict reached. I know we've been talking to our legal analysts about what it means, seemingly favoring the state and at least perhaps convictions on multiple counts. But we will see. Now just minutes away, waiting. They said by 4 o'clock, so we're now within about 6 minutes of that point. And again, demonstrators, media, that South Lawn filling up. From where I am, obviously we know security is intense. The governor has called in state troopers from other states, Nebraska, Ohio. I would just sort of comment. I did just see a couple of Anoka County sheriff deputy squads coming downtown here a minute ago, heading towards this crowd at the government center. Obviously, we know Operation Safety Net, multi-jurisdictional. The National Guard is here. We talked about the clearing out of downtown, buildings evacuated. A law firm, Ryan Pasiga, with us earlier, telling us he had his teams with go bags. Minneapolis Public Schools, looking forward these next few days, had already announced they were going to distance learning because of the potential of disruptions around the city. It's just really hard to believe since the Memorial Day death, the tragedy that unfolded at 38th and Chicago, not even a full year later, here we are, a jury with a verdict, unanimous verdicts up and down. We don't know what they are. 3 counts, murder 2, murder 3, second-degree manslaughter, and this backdrop that it comes upon with what happened in Brooklyn Center with Dante Wright recently, the unrest that unfolded there, the move to try to sequester the jury in the days or in the hours that basically followed that, and Judge Cahill's decision not to. Of course, this jury was sequestered overnight, so they deliberated 4 hours yesterday. They stayed together in an area hotel. Then they got back at it at 8 a.m. this morning, 12 hours in between 8 a.m. And by, I didn't mark it on my clock, but I think around 2:25, official word had come down that the jury had reached unanimous verdicts and was ready to read these decisions in court. Of course, they will come in, 12 of them. We have what has been described as a fairly diverse jury for Hennepin County, 4 members self-describing Black, 2 multi-race, 6 white jurors making up this panel of 12. And we await what they have to say. They certainly know the world is watching. It will be interesting, as Kelsey mentioned a little bit ago, just to see if any of them want to talk afterwards or if this is something they will just stay silent on and sort of do this anonymously as they cast their verdict today after listening to weeks of evidence, 45 witnesses, testimony from all sides, and now the world awaits what those 12 people, the conclusions they reached during their sequestered deliberations over the last day and a half.
And quickly, Paul, you had the chance to be a pool reporter in the courtroom. What did you witness with the jury? I know I read a lot of notes that said they were very attentive most of the time, and they got right to work yesterday.
They did get right to work. I was curious to kind of see what they felt about Eric Nelson's lengthy closing arguments yesterday. And, I talked to the pool reporter who was inside there. She was describing that there was some tune out, some distraction. But she said nothing over the top, right? We were sitting in the media center thinking, oh, God, this is, I don't mean to disrespect Eric Nelson. He had a hell of a job to defend his client, and he did it wonderfully. But it just went on and on. I didn't know how the jury might react in that moment, but she said nothing over the top. They did seem focused. A lot of note taking. The one thing
guys,
I
we are
will
just
say about
standing by right now.
I'm
I'm watching this with you guys, essentially. Hey, Miscellaneous, how are you?
And then in the second witness was the longtime homicide
Yes.
detective,
Oh, and I should
Lieutenant
put the
Richard
link,
Zimmerman,
the
and he's
YouTube
old
link. I
school
don't know what I'm
police, and it's
thinking.
just kind
To
of
those of you who
engaging,
may be in
as a
Facebook,
witness.
if you're
And when he was
curious
talking about
on
how the move of
how
a knee to the back of George Floyd's neck
get
was totally
to
uncalled
the
for, and
YouTube
nowhere in his
channel where
3
you'll
decades
find
of
many more of
training
us
had he ever
chatting
been
if you
trained
want
to
to
do anything
chat.
like that. You
Let me
saw
give you the
all at that
link.
point, all 14 jurors, of course, 2 have
I'll
been
throw it
sent
in the
home
chat.
as alternates. But at that point, everybody went right to their notebook and appeared really engaged, really interested. I thought that was a point worth noting. And then the other thing was just how quickly I was mid-trial, and already I had noticed, friendships had sprung up during breaks, jurors turning to one another in their seating area and talking. And of course, you got to remember, and I know we've talked about
All
this,
right, got it
this
copied.
this courtroom is just so
Here you
different.
guys
The
go,
layout,
y'all.
the feel of mid-COVID, the plexiglass, the jurors are spread further
There
apart.
you go.
Usually they're
All right, guys,
kind
I'm
of
just
bunched
gonna
in a little tighter. It's
be
difficult to
quiet
make
here
eye
while we watch
contact with the
this.
defendant, how they have him situated, and the way the courtroom lays out. So it's a different dynamic. Just keep that in mind as you watch. I don't know the exact layout of the 3 cameras, Court TV, who's providing the cameras inside the courtroom that we do broadcast live. They have some fixed camera positions that Judge Cahill has agreed to as part of this process of televising, of making this most public of trials public. And I do want to say the one other thing about the camera angle, this is the one time where the camera will be allowed to zoom in on the defendant. Otherwise, the rules from Cahill was to stay wide, no tight shots. But today, look for that camera to zoom in on the defendant's reaction when these verdicts are read.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. We appreciate that. I want to remind our viewers it's 4 o'clock now. This is the time in which we were told the verdict would come in from this jury. We're going to show you very live images from all around the Twin Cities, but primarily you'll see that symbol there, that iconic seal there, that is inside the courtroom. We'll make sure you understand that. And then we have Skyfox 9 up in the air as well. We have a camera at 38th in Chicago, and of course we have a ground camera there outside the Hennepin County Courthouse there on the plaza scene. And we are watching what happens very closely once that verdict is read. Again, the charges against Eric Chauvin, this jury considers all of them or none of them. They can come back with a partial verdict in terms of the charges, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. They could deem him guilty on all charges or innocent on all charges, not guilty. And those are what we're watching for right now, the combination. We do know that there's a unanimous verdict in this because they came back with that, and the court has on record with the verdict. So we know at least that is what's happening here in the next few minutes.
And Randy, policing, a verdict aside, this really has the potential to change policing in the country. And I wanted to bring in Mike Bryant one more time and lean on him in what could be the last few moments we have here before the verdict is read. Mike, I think back to Dr. Martin Tobin specifically and his testimony. Do you think that, verdict aside, that the testimony given during this trial could have the potential to change the way that police, the use of force specifically?
Potentially. It's interesting because you had a number of police officers that testified this isn't the way we do it anyway. So the question is what was the training issue early that some say it isn't how we do it, and then we never heard from the defendant, which is his right under the Constitution, but he did it this way, and there's other examples of it being done. I think they brought up some examples when there's been testimony contrary by one of the experts. But it's another thing to look at. And with what continues to happen across the country, those are all things that need to be looked at. As far as training goes, we need to make sure that training's done properly, and that we have people who have the abilities to do what they're doing it.
Mike, I want to ask you about this jury, and try and put yourself as our legal analyst in the eyes of this jury. They had those 3 charges, and as I mentioned just a short time ago, they have to consider all 3 when they make their decision on something like this. You watched this trial unfold. You watched the key points of this trial. You saw the defense's objective and their game plan, as well as the state's objectives and game plan. If you're a jury sitting there yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what was the first thing that sort of is the bellwether moment in that trial for a juror?
Well, there were a couple things that I think you could point to. As a group, we know that there were a group that tended to not get into the news or not follow the news on what was happening in this case anyway, because they wouldn't be on the jury if they were deep into it. Second is, we know when they were brought back on that Monday, and a group of them came back and they said they heard something and they turned it off right away. So as a group, they stayed away from everything, or as much as they could on this case. And then suddenly, boom, they got weeks of the videos over and over again, and the experts over and over again, and people talking over again. So they got a lot of, for people that originally turned away from it, a lot of information along those lines. For me, big points that came up in the trial were when we saw George Floyd inside Cup Foods. We got to see him alive. People you don't normally experience that. Did you get a chance to see somebody who the case is involving a dead person, but you get to see a bunch about him when he's alive that just is minutes before he dies. The point when they heard the defendant talk to Mr. Williams on that tape, that was an opportunity for them to hear him at the scene right after it's happened and make some determinations on what that felt. I wonder what effect it had on.
All right, I want to take you now inside the courtroom. As you can see there, Judge Peter Cahill has taken his seat at the bench.
Here we go.
The jury is in as well, since our court camera is now focused on the judge. It's moments away now from that verdict being read. Let's just stop and listen to see what the judge has to say.
All rise for the jury.
It's time.
All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, count 1. Court file number 27, CR6. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19.
We got a guilty verdict.
Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021
on all counts
at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no.
Found guilty on all
Juror
counts.
number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts, so say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So all rise for the jury.
Oh, man. Look how he's looking. Like the jury did something wrong. He does, doesn't he? He looks shocked, doesn't he, Natalie? Good. I'm so...
All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
All right.
Meaning
Thank
Derek
you.
Chauvin's going straight to jail. He's been out on bond.
We're adjourned.
So, counsel, dates?
I am, I can't.
I can send you.
Yeah.
And with that,
And this is awesome.
Derek Chauvin
He went straight to
remanded
jail,
the custody of the
Sunshine. He's
Hennepin
been
County
remanded.
Sheriff, guilty
He's going to jail, prison.
on all
Bye,
3
Derek.
counts, second-degree
He's
murder,
facing
guilty,
40
third-degree
years.
murder, guilty, second-degree manslaughter,
Max
also
on
guilty.
the
We showed
second
you
degree
it live.
charge
The count
alone.
came down about
He's guilty on all 3 counts.
We
all
also
counts.
are showing you now what happened when those guilty verdicts were read. The crowds at the Hennepin County Government Center at 38th in Chicago,
Oh my gosh,
all
this is
elated with those verdicts. As you can imagine, this is the anticipation of all of this has been on the minds of Minnesotans.
now the concern that I have, you know, is all that
This is
appeal
something that is the
stuff,
culmination
you know.
of what occurred
But
with George Floyd on May 25th, there at 38th in Chicago. When
See ya,
Officer
Derek.
Chauvin, then Officer Chauvin,
Like,
knelt on
go to
George
prison,
Floyd's
straight
neck
to prison.
for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The rest, as you've seen
Don't
in
get
the last
$200
couple
to
weeks, is
Pasco.
history, with the testimony both from the state and from the defense.
It does,
trying to prove
Lexi.
the
It does
state that
feel right.
This was a
Absolutely,
willful
it
act,
feels so
that he,
right.
in fact,
I don't
did
know.
commit murder, and then his defense team trying
Anyone
to prove
who
that
would
George Floyd's
dare
death was
murder
the result
another
of
man
George Floyd's health,
the way
contributed
he
by drugs
did
in his
on
system.
video at that.
This jury, a member,
Like-
14-member jury, decided guilty on all
And I, you know, of course,
This is a historic
this doesn't
moment. You
fix
saw the crowd's
everything,
reaction
but
there in the boxes.
at
as this
least
verdict
some
was
justice
read.
has
We
been
have Lee
served
Hutton
in
on standby
regards
with
to
his
that
reaction
Derek
as well.
Chauvin character.
Lee, you and I have been covering
But
this
what
from the
about
beginning.
the
I
other
need to gauge
officers
your
that were
reaction.
there? I want them to be
I hate to say it,
held
I'm
just as accountable as
surprised,
Derek
but
Chauvin.
this is
Like,
the right verdict, and the reason
I want
why
to see
I'm
that happen in
surprised,
all these cases.
Minnesota, this is the first time in history where we've seen a situation where the excessive
It's a big
force
step,
be
Amanda.
recognized as not okay. This goes a long way for individuals, especially
He is a
people of
murderer,
color,
Red Rebel. Yeah, he is.
that their voices are heard, that they are conscious in the eyes of the law, and that factors of
I don't know
carbon
if
monoxide and
I don't
enlarged
know
heart.
if the way. Sorry, y'all. We just lost our tab. Let me bring that back. I don't know if the way that they do the sentencing. He's facing 40 years on the second degree murder charge, and then the subsequent second and third charge, which is the lesser counts. I'm not sure if those could be like ran in a concurrent way. as far as if they, I mean, consecutive, or if they would run those like concurrently with the way they do their sentencing structure. I'm not sure, but wow. Okay, sorry, you guys. This browser is giving me problems there. So anyway, this is a great day. Like, this is a great, I'm so glad that they found
that all three counts
him
here
guilty
were
on
for
all these counts.
unintentional
I
murders.
cannot believe
And what we saw
how
on that
heartless
videotape
people
is that
can
George
be.
Floyd died as a
I just
result
will
of
never
what
understand
happened.
that.
I mean, this is my opinion that
He was
died
so
as a
he was
result
so
of what happened
stone-faced, right?
in that 9 minutes
And
as a
smug.
result of
He's
having
been so
officers shove
smug.
his knee on his
He was
neck
so
for
smug
that
in court
long.
today.
And I think that
When,
this
you know,
case
earlier
was
this
correctly
morning, when he was in
charged.
court, when he
I think
came
the
in,
prosecution
just the
did a very
way
good job
he
of
was
saying to
looking,
the
his
jurors, you
face,
can believe what you saw.
yesterday,
And I think there are
pretty much
so
every day
many
we've seen
people
him.
throughout our
He's
country
been
that
so
just breathed a
smug
collective
about
sigh of relief. I know that's not legal commentary; it's
this
more
whole
social commentary.
process.
But I think so many people felt that the criminal justice system had not, for
And
lack of a better way of saying it, betrayed
he
them
not
at
only
that time.
deserves the 40-year sentence.
And, you know,
I
as
don't
we
know,
have been
again, how the
watching
sentencing's going to
and,
go, if
and
they're going to
waiting
do
to
like
see
a
what, in
40-year
fact, the
sentence, and then
jury
he'll
had
serve
decided,
the
Jessica, I was thinking
other
about
two
some of those moments
sentences
on the
for
part of the
those
defense
charges, like
trying to
concurrent
make
or
the case
whatever.
that, in fact, this use of force
But
by Derek Chauvin was
it'd be,
justified. What did you see from a legal
I doubt they
perspective
would do
as
like a
the defense
consecutive
attorneys tried to
type
make
of
that
sentencing
argument
structure.
that
Atlanta's happy,
use of the knee
celebrating
to
on
the
the
neck
west
was
side of
justified for
town.
9 minutes and 29 seconds.
Well, obviously, what we
Wow.
know now is that it was not a persuasive legal argument. You know, in
Yeah,
terms
he
of what do I
has,
think of them
Patricia. He
making
sure
the
has.
argument, I think they have to. So they are defending an
This
excessive
is a
use of
glorious
force
day,
case.
truth
They're
seeker.
defending a case
Yes,
where
it
one of the
is.
counts is whether or not George Floyd committed a felony. What would that felony be? An assault because of excessive force. And so as defense attorneys, you have to take on each count.
All you cops and police officers that like to exercise control
that's not the
and be
case.
violent
Now, obviously, it wasn't
towards people
particularly
because you
persuasive.
feel
I think
like
one of the
nobody's
big
watching
problems for
you.
the defense is that you have the police chief saying,
These
this is not how
videos
I
and
train
this
people.
wave
You
of
have the
police
police chief and a
brutality and
number of law
all of that,
enforcement
you're not
officers
going to
really
be able
trying
to
distance
escape it.
themselves
So
from what
take
Officer
note.
Chauvin did. And
Take
I thought
note.
that was
What Derek
it's not
Chauvin
just that the
did,
jury was able to look, it's that the
he put a
prosecution was able to
whole
say, and here are the experts to show you
profession
that you're
under
not
fire,
imagining it.
right? You know, and then
We
the
also have
situation
with
with
us
Dante
Lorenzo
Wright has
Boyd. He's the
happened.
Vice President for Diversity
So,
and Inclusion
yeah, this
and the
is going to
Chief Diversity
be
Officer at the University of New Haven.
beginning to,
Lorenzo, you have
it
spent
could
over a
possibly
decade
spark
working in the
a
Sussex
wave
County,
of
Massachusetts Sheriff's Department, and you work on police
people
community
starting
relations
to
now.
convict
What
these cops. I
impact do
really
you
hope
see
that it
this verdict
does.
having both
I
inside
hope that
and
people will
outside
start.
of
They said this was the
Minneapolis?
first time in history.
I think this is a great verdict for
So it is
policing
a good
everywhere.
verdict.
This will show.
No one should ever, ever, ever be allowed to willingly just murder and kill like that. That was just exactly. He's been smug every time you see him. Stone face. Yeah. And this is a word and a lesson to everybody, and especially other cops and police officers who continue to think that they can brutalize people, who continue to pull people over for stupid reasons. Air freshener hanging from mirrors. There's, this is a really a great verdict. It is a wonderful verdict. All counts. All counts. And just find him guilty on one. All counts. So yeah, like it is a really, really good day and a great verdict. And on 420. Yes, and on 420. Yeah. The way he was looking when the jury's verdict was read by the judge, he was looking so intently, right? Almost like, oh no, this could never happen to me. That sort of a thing. Yeah, like I guess he thought his look was going to change the sentence, or not the sentence, but change the verdict or something. Like, your control, you can't exercise it anymore like you were out on the streets. Do y'all know his wife divorced him too? Oh, absolutely, Queen. Shout out to you. His wife divorced him, and got some sort of like settlement or something. But yeah, he's lost his wife. He's lost his job. He's no longer a police officer, obviously, but he was like side-eyeing the jury, right? I think that's probably gonna be like a talking point that's gonna come from all of that too, as people were watching. And that was a historic moment. I think that's gonna be noted about the way he was looking during the reading of the verdict. Like, he, you know, it was just kind of like intense, right? That's the next step. How much time is he going to serve? And how much time is the judge going to give him? The maximum would be 40 years. So the second degree charge is 40 years. 1 second, I'll actually tell you the exact time. Okay, so the second degree murder carries a max sentence of 40 years. The third degree murder, if he would have got like third degree murder, that would have been like 25 years, and then it goes to 10 years for second degree manslaughter. But they found him guilty on the second degree murder. That's 40 years on that charge alone. So the hope would be, I think many could agree, would be to see, because I've seen some saying, hey, many of our people don't get any second chances. They get sentenced egregiously as far as the amount of time that's getting served out to people, defendants in this country. So he doesn't have to deal. Anybody who does that from start to finish. He acted like he was trying to scare the jury or something. It was weird, right? It was real awkward. Like, yes, he does. Yep, he does. It's kind of weird, right? Like, could you imagine being a relative of his? Like, I wouldn't even want anyone to know, because that would be just embarrassing and shameful and all that. Like, it's not good to be no relative of Derek Chauvin's. Oh man, yes. So in the sentence, all his complaints that the department got will go against him and come into play. And they're going to have a whole sentencing phase, and we'll see, how that process proceeds to go. So, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this feed. It was cool hanging out with you guys. Thanks for joining the live stream, and I'll see y'all next time.